I'm now going to hand over to Bujar Gallopeni, who's a lecturer and head of the Public Administration and Welfare Program in Mitrovica College. He's conducting his doctoral studies at the University of Sheffield, UK, and has extensive experience in the education sector and social protection systems. His presentation will be around how our system protects children in Kosovo. Over to you, Bujar.
Thank you, Sabine. I hope that you can hear me.
Perfect.
Yes, so now we are in March, and it was about 1 year ago when we started to collect the data about this study, and just in the front of the pandemic, and of course interrupted during the stage of the data collection. But it was 1 year earlier, actually 2 years from now, and it was about that we heard and read in Kosovo local and even some international media reporting about a case of sexual abuse of a 16-year-old female adolescent by her teacher. The victim was triggered and incited under the promise of marriage as a form of means of her manipulation and exploitation. After some time that the victim was abused and exploited, she decides to report the situation to the police in the town she was living. The police officer who was investigating the case, instead of dealing with the issue, he started to abuse sexually with the victim. So he became actually the second person abusing the victim. So after 2 years of systematic sexual abuse of the adolescent girl, first by her teacher and then by the police officer, actually, the victim gets pregnant with the police officer, fortunately. So in order for the police to hide his action, he convinces the victim to go to a gynecologist for committing abortion. And so it happens indeed. The gynecologist realizes the abortion in illegal procedure and thus becoming the third person of abuse in the case. So while these developments were happening, somehow the information passes to the media, and the media started to report the situation to the public. Accordingly, the public audience and respective institutions began immediately to publicly condemn the act, calling for immediate action by the justice authorities. Many protests were organized by organizations and initiatives who were working with child protection, and all of them were in search for the proper justice to the case. And finally, around 7 people were prosecuted in the court for this case. 3 teachers, a police officer, a doctor, a social worker, and a lawyer, for either directly or indirectly abusing the victim, and for neglecting their actions towards dealing legally with the case, or for interference with justice. So the main charges these people were prosecuted by the court were sexual abuse by abusing their position, authority, or profession, incitement to sexual acts with a false promise of marriage, incitement to unauthorized termination of pregnancy, and intimidation during criminal proceedings for the case. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is just one form of child violence and abuse that our children, are experiencing these days. And such examples, unfortunately, we see and hear often in our countries. You have heard and will be also hearing today through our research presentations several forms of violence that children are experiencing in our countries. And possibly, as we see different reactions our children have to that. So in general, people, and particularly children and adolescents, start naturally, normally to believe and trust the system, which is mandated and called for their protection and for defending their rights. And many often, as we can see, the system is now and then shaken with various misconducts and violation of laws and negligence to fulfill their task and legitimate mandate. About this topic, we also wanted to check with children in our study about how they trust the system of social protection and how they respond to it when facing various forms of violence. We wanted to check about when they face various forms of violence, how they react to inform and ask for support, like, for example, to their family members and family circle, to their friends, school and school personnel, and respective authorities, as they were mentioned many times today, like police, community police, centers for social work, courts, judges, and the others who are actually in part of the system of social protection. So we see in general that, for example, children and adolescents in Kosovo have more trust to their family, like parents and close family circle, to ask for support when they face various forms of physical violence, for example. While schools and respective authorities, such as police, centers for social work, and courts, are ranked lower when it comes for children reaction to support, to get support for physical violence. On the other case, for example, when we asked children about psychological violence support, there were even less trust among respective authorities, which are ranked quite low by children participants, particularly by female children. On the other side, while for the sexual violence and abuse, authorities, again, police, centers for social work, and courts, are ranked by male children participants higher than schools, for example, and how they get support from schools. They are ranked on average by female children participants, which indeed we see it poses a lower level of trust among the female adolescents. However, for the issues connected to trafficking and exploitation, both female and male children participants again have higher level of ranking for authorities, and that was as high as their families were ranked when it comes to the trust they have on them for getting support. But this is pretty different for bullying, for example, which is a quite spread phenomena, particularly in schools and streets that children are facing. And children participants declare that they trust more their family for dealing with the matter about the bullying issue. After that, schools are ranked second, and other social protection mechanisms and structures are ranked lower. So in conclusion to these findings in Kosovo about how children are trusting the social protection system to call and ask for the support, in general, authorities such as police, again, centers for social work, and courts are ranked quite low by children participants to trust in when facing various forms of violence actions. Then, for example, asking support from family and schools to some stances. So children feel more comfortable to ask, solve their problems when face violence among the family. But that is also the message that how institutions are to be further trust on that. And in fact, we see as a conclusion that female adolescents in general seem to be more vulnerable towards their violence than their male counterparts. And that in average, female adolescents rank lower trust among schools and authorities than male participants. So this is, we see that the female children are more vulnerable and they need much higher attention than male in order that they are supported now and then when they face various forms of violence, particularly psychological and sexual and exploitation. So ladies and gentlemen, we have all in our countries advanced legal and policy measures for strengthening the social protection system, particularly actions for children. Even we have established various respective bodies and structures mandated for fighting against and dealing with the child violence. Unfortunately, there are also good willing organizations in all our countries like Terdezam, for example, but also many other organizations who are doing a very good work in strengthening the social protection system. In fact, they are doing a very marvelous job in this direction. But the questions that we need to further pay attention are we doing enough? And is this all sufficient to protect our children? I think the best answers, as we are seeing today, are that we hear the stories, we hear more voices of our children. We would like more to see what they have to say about this. And of course, we need for more, as it was mentioned from many of our fellows today, we need more intersectoral support and approach and collaboration among key actors in order that the child protection system is strengthened and better functional. Particularly, it is imperative to strengthen the collaboration with schools, because as we see a lot of violence actions happening within the school environment, then there are important very much centers for social work, because they are mandated for the leading mechanism in the child protection part in the country. And of course, the need for more specialized child protection community police, in order that community and children feel better and they have more trust to report the cases. And of course, that this phenomena is treated better and more properly by the justice system. It is particularly important to work more with schools and families, especially to establish school protection mechanisms. So this is why our children don't report and don't get a lot of trust in school. So we do lack, for example, confidential school focal points, like people who are more called and more professional to deal with such issues, and particularly on being confident when children trust them to report different forms of violence. In fact, all these actions would require also a backup with legislative regulations. So all these measures will become more sustainable in implementation and their functionality. So ladies and gentlemen, we do hope that these efforts, such as today's event and all this research, will contribute to a next level of work and mobilization of respective actors to further strengthen the child protection system in our countries. Thank you.